The Imperial Council chamber hummed with the nervous energy of 100 different species, all pretending they weren't absolutely terrified. I say pretending because, well, let's be honest here. When you summon the galaxy's most notorious pirate warlord to answer for his crimes, and he shows up anyway? That's not confidence. That's suicide with extra steps. I'm Velkara, by the way, junior diplomat for the Thessian Accord, which is a fancy way of saying, I take notes while important people argue about things that could get us all killed. Today's flavor of potential annihilation? Warlord Kravik, the Unbroken, who'd spent the last 3 cycles raiding colony worlds and making the entire Outer Rim his personal playground of destruction. The guy was massive. Even for a Kragnoth, he was pushing 8 feet of pure muscle, chitin armor, and bad attitude. His forearms were crossed in what I assumed was his version of casual disrespect, and his mandibles kept clicking in this pattern that my translator helpfully informed me was the equivalent of humming show tunes. Except, show tunes about disemboweling your enemies. You dare summon me? Kravik's voice boomed through the chamber, rattling the ceremonial crystals hanging from the ceiling. Several junior delegates flinched. I didn't blame them. The council speaks of law, of order, of consequences. But I ask you this. Who enforces these laws against one such as me? Valid question, actually. The council's military fleet had gotten their collective backsides handed to them 3 times in the last year trying to corner Kravik. Turns out, when you spend most of your budget on fancy diplomatic vessels instead of, weapons that work, you tend to lose fights. High Chancellor Morvex, a Peltharian whose skin kept shifting through increasingly nervous shades of purple, cleared his throats. All 3 of them. Warlord Kravik, your actions have violated 17 interstellar treaties, destroyed 4 colonies, and caused the deaths of over 2 million sentient beings. This council demands your surrender and submission to trial. Kravik laughed. It sounded like someone grinding metal in a trash compactor. Demands? You demand nothing of me, Morvex. Your fleets scatter before me like frightened younglings. Your soldiers weep at the mention of my name. What precisely gives you the authority to make demands? And that's when she walked in. Now, I'd heard of humans before. Everyone had. They'd joined the Galactic community about 20 years back, caused a minor stir by refusing to follow about 60% of established protocols, then mostly kept to themselves in their little corner of space. Word was, they came from a death world, but so did the Kragnoth and half a dozen other species. Didn't make them special. This human was female, I think. Human gender indicators are weird. She stood maybe 5.5 feet tall, which made her tiny compared to most species in the chamber, and absolutely minuscule next to Kravik. She had dark skin, black hair pulled back in what I later learned was called a bun, and she was wearing this perfectly ordinary-looking gray uniform with absolutely no ornamentation except for a single patch on her shoulder. United Earth Defense Force, it read, with a picture of their homeworld. Oh, and she was armed. Just one weapon, a blade of some kind attached to her hip. Nothing fancy. No plasma rifles, no disruptors, no molecular destabilizers. A knife. Like something you'd use to cut food. The entire chamber went quiet. Not the respectful quiet you get during ceremonies, but the kind of quiet that happens right before someone does something phenomenally stupid and everyone wants to watch. High Chancellor Morvex's skin went from nervous purple to oh-no pink. Ah, yes, may I introduce Captain Maya Torres, representing the United Earth Defense Force. Captain Torres has volunteered to serve as our, enforcement officer in this matter. Kravik's mandibles stopped clicking. He turned to look at Torres, all 4 eyes focusing on her with the kind of intensity usually reserved for targeting systems. Then he started laughing again, even louder than before. This? This is your answer? You bring me a tiny creature with a tiny knife and expect me to tremble? He took a step forward, his massive form casting a shadow over Torres that could have eclipsed a small moon. I have killed warriors twice your size before my morning meal, little thing. I have bathed in the blood of champions. What makes you think you pose any threat to me whatsoever? Torres didn't move, didn't even blink. She just stood there, hands clasped behind her back, looking up at Kravik with an expression that I can only describe as professionally bored. With respect, warlord. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to give you a choice. Surrender peacefully, stand trial, accept your sentence, or don't. Either way works for me. Either way? Kravik leaned down, bringing his face level with hers. His breath, which smelled like something had died in a sulfur pit, washed over her. And if I choose not to surrender, what then, little human? Will you enforce the council's will? Will you make me comply? Torres smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile that said she knew something everyone else didn't, and she was really looking forward to sharing that information. If you force me to? Yeah, I'll make you comply. The chamber erupted. Delegates started shouting, some in outrage, others in what I think was supposed to be protective concern, but came out more like panicked squawking. High Chancellor Morvex tried to restore order, but his voice got lost in the chaos. Kravik just laughed harder. Such bravado, such confidence. Very well, tiny human. I accept your challenge. Show me what a Deathworlder can do. And that's when things got interesting. Torres's hand moved to her blade. She didn't draw. It, not yet, just rested her fingers on the grip in this casual way that somehow made every combat-trained individual in the chamber instinctively take a step back. The really impressive part? She did all this while maintaining perfect eye contact with a warlord who'd personally killed more beings than most plagues. Understood, Torres said quietly. For the record, Warlord Kravik, I want you to know that I tried. Remember that part. I tried to do this peacefully. Kravik's response was to swing one of his massive fists at her head. The blow came fast enough that I actually heard the air displacement, a whistling sound that cut through the chamber like a scream. It would have pulverized a Thessian skull, would have turned a Peltharian into paste, would have probably knocked most species into next week. Torres wasn't there when it arrived. She'd moved, this fluid motion that my eyes almost couldn't track, and suddenly she was 3 feet to the left. Kravik's fist hit empty air and cracked the marble floor where she'd been standing. Before he could recover, Torres stepped in close, inside his guard, and drove her elbow into a joint in his lower arm. The crack echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. Kravik roared, more in surprise than pain, and swung with 2 more arms. Torres ducked under the first, deflected the second with a motion so economical it barely counted as movement, and drove her knee into what I later learned was approximately where a Kragnoth keeps their primary breathing organ. The roar turned into a wheeze. You see, Torres said, still in that conversational tone, dancing away from another wild swing, the thing about being unbreakable, about being this unstoppable force of nature, is that you start to believe your own press. You stop training, stop adapting, stop thinking. She was moving constantly now, never staying in one place, always just barely out of reach of Kravik's increasingly frantic attacks. The warlord was fast for his size. Sure, but Torres moved like water, like smoke, like she'd been born knowing exactly where her opponent would strike before they did. You know what we call that on Earth? Torres continued, almost cheerfully. She caught Kravik's wrist as he swung, used his own momentum to redirect him, and sent him stumbling into a support column hard enough to crack the stone. We call it getting complacent. And complacency kills. Kravik spun, this time leading with all 4 arms in a pattern designed to create an unavoidable wall of destruction. Smart move. Would have worked against 99% of opponents. Torres went down, dropped into a slide that took her under his arms, between his legs, and she finally drew that knife. The blade was maybe 6 inches long. Simple, unadorned, probably couldn't cut through his armor. Didn't need to, because Torres came up behind him and put that knife against the soft spot where his primary nerve cluster connected to his spine. "I could sever this right now," she said softly. "Paralyze you from the neck down. You'd live, probably. Be conscious. Just couldn't move. Couldn't fight. Couldn't do anything but think about every choice that led you here. Is that what you want?" The chamber was dead silent. Nobody breathed. Nobody moved. We were all too busy watching this tiny human hold a knife to the most dangerous warlord in the sector and somehow make him the one who looked scared. Kravik's mandibles clicked once, twice, then stopped. "What are you?" Torres actually chuckled at that. "I'm human. From Earth. Third planet from a yellow dwarf star. Gravity a bit higher than standard. Atmosphere about 78% nitrogen. We've got these things called oceans that'll kill you in about a dozen different ways, weather systems that regularly destroy entire cities, and predators that see us as snacks. Oh, and we invented warfare before we invented agriculture. Been killing each other creatively for about 10,000 years. Give or take." She pressed the knife a little harder. Not enough to break skin, but enough to make her point. "You're a warlord. Very impressive. Scary reputation. But on my world, you'd be Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, if we're being generous." Kravik made a sound that might have been a whimper. "What do you want? Surrender. Now. Or I demonstrate exactly how many ways human beings have learned to hurt things that are bigger and stronger than we are. And Kravik? That list is really long." Time seemed to stretch. I found myself holding my breath, waiting for the warlord to do something stupid, to call her bluff, to try one more attack. But he didn't. Because it wasn't a bluff. Everyone in that chamber could see it. This human wasn't boasting or posturing. She was stating facts with the same energy most people use to discuss the weather. Kravik's voice was hollow. "I surrender." Torres stepped back, sheathing her knife in one smooth motion. Smart choice. And just like that, it was over. The most notorious warlord in the Outer Rim, the creature who'd terrorized a dozen worlds and defeated 3 military fleets, surrendered to a human with a knife. Security forces rushed in, slapping restraints on Kravik's wrists while he stood there in shock. And Torres just brushed some dust off her uniform like she'd just finished a light workout. High Chancellor Morvex looked like he might pass out from relief. "Captain Torres, on behalf of the Council, we thank you for your service." That was, quite frankly, the most remarkable display of combat prowess I've ever witnessed. Torres shrugged. "Just doing my job, Chancellor. Though for what it's worth, next time you might want to lead with the enforcement and save the diplomacy for people who actually respond to it. Would save everyone some time." As they led Kravik away, I found myself staring at Torres, trying to reconcile this tiny woman with the absolute whirlwind of controlled violence I'd just witnessed. She caught me looking and raised an eyebrow. "Something I can help you with, delegate?" How did you? I was babbling. "Professional diplomat, ladies and gentlemen." "You're so small," Torres grinned. "Yeah, I get that a lot. Here's the thing about humans. We're not the biggest, not the strongest, not the fastest. But we're persistent, we're creative, and we've spent our entire evolutionary history figuring out how to kill things that absolutely should have killed us first. Makes you good at fighting." She started walking toward the exit, then paused and looked back. "Oh, and just so you know, that thing with the knife? That was me. Being gentle. Kravik's going to live, stand trial, all very civilized. If I'd actually wanted to hurt him?" Her smile went cold. "Well, let's just say there's a reason Earth is classified as a death world, and it's not because of the weather." And with that, Captain Maya Torres walked out of the council chamber, leaving behind a room full of delegates who suddenly understood why humanity's application to join the galactic community had included a warning label. Me? I went back to my quarters and immediately requested a transfer. Somewhere far away from humans. Somewhere safe. I really didn't want to see what happened when they got serious. 3 months later, I was still having nightmares about that knife. You'd think watching a human casually dismantle the galaxy's most feared warlord would earn them some respect, maybe a bit of caution from the other species. You'd be wrong. Turns out, most of the council decided that Torres got lucky, that Kravik was caught off guard, that it was a fluke, because accepting the alternative, that humans were actually that dangerous, would mean re-evaluating everything. And politicians hate re-evaluating things. My transfer request got denied, by the way. Apparently, I was now the council's resident human expert because I'd been in the same room as one for 15 minutes. Bureaucracy at its finest. Which is why I found myself on a transport heading toward the frontier zones, specifically to a little disputed territory called Thresh Point. The place was a nightmare, honestly. 3 different species claimed it, none of them wanted to actually fight over it, and pirates used it as a base to raid everyone equally. Standard galactic mess. The council, in their infinite wisdom, decided to send a peacekeeping force, make a show of strength, establish order, all that good stuff. 500 troops from a dozen different species, state-of-the-art equipment, enough firepower to level a small city. Oh, and 1 human advisor. I found Captain Torres in the transport's cargo bay, doing something that looked like a combination of meditation and controlled falling. She'd drop into these positions that should have been anatomically impossible, hold them for exactly 10 seconds, then flow into the next one. Her breathing never changed, steady and calm, like she was taking a nap, instead of contorting herself into shapes that made my joints ache just watching. "It's called yoga," she said, without opening her eyes or pausing her routine. "Helps with flexibility and focus. You should try it." "How did you know I was watching?" "You breathe loud. Also, your footsteps have a specific rhythm. 3 steps. Pause. 2 more steps. You've been doing it since you came through the door." She transitioned into a position that involved balancing her entire body weight on her hands. "It's a nervous habit. You should work on that." I decided not to mention that everything about humans made me nervous. "We're approaching Thresh Point. Commander Zell wants to brief the senior staff." Torres flipped upright in one smooth motion, landing on her feet without even a wobble. She grabbed a towel, wiped her face, and followed me to the briefing room. The casual way she moved, like violence was always just one option among many, never quite stopped being unsettling. Commander Zell was a Vorath, 7 feet of scales and military precision. He had 3 centuries of combat experience and thought humans were overrated. He'd made that very clear during the flight. Multiple times, to anyone who'd listen. "About time," Zell growled as we entered. "Let's make this quick. Thresh Point has approximately 2,000 hostiles, mostly pirates and raiders from various species. Our force is 500 strong, well-armed, and properly trained. We establish a perimeter here, here, and here." He gestured at the tactical display. "Standard suppression pattern. Contain, eliminate resistance, secure the territory. Simple." Torres leaned forward, studying the display. "What about civilians?" "What about them?" "The intel report mentions about 300 non-combatants living in Thresh Point. Families, merchants, people who just ended up there. Where are they in this plan?" Zell's nostril slits flared. "Collateral concerns are secondary to the mission objective. We cannot compromise operational security for every potential civilian." "Can't? Or won't?" The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Zell turned to face Torres fully, using his height advantage to loom over her. Didn't work. She just looked up at him with that same expression she'd given Kravik, professional and utterly unbothered. "Captain Torres, you are here as an advisor. You do not command this operation. You do not dictate strategy. You observe and provide input when requested. Are we clear? Torres smiled. This one said she was about to teach someone a lesson they wouldn't enjoy learning. Crystal clear, Commander. Just so we're clear on something too. When this plan falls apart, and trust me it will, I'm going to remind you that I warned you, and then I'm going to fix it. On my terms. We landed 2 hours later. The operation went wrong in the first 5 minutes. Turns out, the pirates at Thresh Point weren't your standard disorganized rabble. Someone had trained them, equipped them properly, and taught them actual tactics. Our standard suppression pattern ran straight into prepared defensive positions, overlapping fields of fire, and what my combat scanner identified as military-grade explosives. 15 soldiers went down in the opening salvo, another 20 in the next 2 minutes. Commander Zell started screaming orders, trying to reorganize, but chaos had already taken root. The kind of chaos that happens when your plan assumes the enemy is stupid, and they turn out not to be. I was crouched behind a cargo container, trying very hard not to die, when Torres dropped down next to me. She had her rifle out now, some human design that looked about as advanced as their knife, which is to say not at all. "Having fun yet?" she asked. "We're getting slaughtered." "Yeah, notice that." She popped up, fired 3 shots in rapid succession, and dropped back down. Somewhere in the distance, someone stopped shooting. "Zell's about to get everyone killed. You should probably get to the transport." "What are you going to do?" Torres checked her rifle, counted her remaining ammunition by touch alone, and grinned that terrifying grin. "My job. The fun way." She moved before I could respond, sprinting from cover to cover with this bizarre pattern that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. Rounds sparked off the ground where she'd been, never quite catching up to where she was. I watched her close the distance to the nearest pirate position, saw her throw something small and dark, then the entire fortification just stopped. No explosion, no fire, just silence. Later, I learned she'd used a flashbang, human invention, designed to temporarily blind and deafen without killing. Apparently, they developed them for situations where they needed to incapacitate without casualties. Because, of course, humans had invented non-lethal ways to render enemies helpless. They'd probably run the numbers and decided it was more efficient than paperwork. Torres cleared 3 positions in as many minutes, alone. While our 500 troops were still trying to establish basic formations, she moved through the battlefield like she owned it, taking impossible shots, using terrain that shouldn't have provided cover, and somehow always being exactly where the enemy wasn't looking. Commander Zell finally noticed. "What is that human doing?" "She's compromising the entire operation with her reckless—" "Wait, is she winning?" She was, single-handedly turning the tide of the battle by doing what she'd done to Kravik. Getting inside their decision loop, moving faster than they could react, hitting them where they were weakest. Basic human tactics, apparently. Though I was starting to suspect there was nothing basic about anything humans did. Then the situation changed. A pirate captain, big ugly Kragnoth, ironically enough, grabbed one of the civilians. A kid, maybe 8 years old in human terms, some species I didn't recognize. He held the child up like a shield and started backing toward a ship. "Nobody move!" he roared. "I'm leaving, and this youngling is coming with me. Anyone tries to stop me, the kid dies." Our troops froze. Standard hostage protocol. Don't escalate, wait for negotiators, and preserve life. All very reasonable, all very by the book. Torres didn't stop moving. She angled toward the pirate captain, rifle up, but not aimed at him. Just walking, calm and steady, like she was out for a stroll. The pirate swung toward her, pressing a blade against the child's throat. "I said don't move, human. And I'm not really good at following orders I disagree with." Torres kept walking. 20 meters. 15. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to put the kid down. Then, you're going to surrender. Or option 2, which involves me putting a round through your primary eye from here and hoping your death spasm doesn't twitch that blade. Your choice, but choose. Fast, because my patience has limits. You're bluffing. You can't make that shot. Torres stopped walking. 10 meters, close enough that I could see her face, see the absolute certainty in her eyes. You know what the really funny thing about humans is? We're persistently, annoyingly optimistic. We see a problem, we assume we can solve it. See a challenge? We assume we can overcome it. See a hostage situation with a low percentage shot? She raised her rifle in one fluid motion. We take the shot. The round hit the pirate captain's eye, passed through his brain, and exited the back of his skull before he could process what happened. His body dropped like someone cut his strings, the blade falling away from the child without ever touching skin. Torres was already moving, catching the kid before they hit the ground, pulling them away from the corpse. "You're okay," she said softly. All that cold efficiency gone, replaced by something almost gentle. "You're safe now. I've got you." The kid burst into tears and clung to her. Torres just held them, making these quiet, soothing sounds, while around her the battle continued to rage. She stayed like that for maybe 30 seconds, then handed the child off to a medic and went right back to work, back to being a weapon. The battle ended 40 minutes later. The pirates, realizing they were up against someone who could make impossible shots and didn't hesitate, surrendered en masse. Final casualties: 23 council troops, 0 civilians, and about 40 pirates who'd made the mistake of shooting first. Commander Zell found Torres after the fighting stopped. She was sitting on a crate, field stripping her rifle with practiced efficiency. Didn't even look up when he approached. "That was reckless," Zell said. His voice lacked conviction, though. "Hard to criticize someone who just saved the operation. You could have gotten that civilian killed." "Could have." "Didn't." Torres slid the bolt assembly back into place with a click. "You know what would have definitely gotten civilians killed? Your plan. Suppression fire in an urban environment with hostiles, mixed among non-combatants. Math doesn't work out great there, Commander." That's not... We had protocols." Torres finally looked up. Her eyes were tired now, the adrenaline wearing off, leaving behind someone who'd just made a lot of hard choices and would have to live with them. "Protocols are great. Love protocols. But sometimes you need to adapt. Read the situation. Make the call that saves lives even if it breaks rules." She stood, slinging her rifle over her shoulder. "That kid I pulled out? 7 years old. Parents died in a raid 2 years ago. Been living in Thresh Point because nowhere else would take them. You know what they said to me after? Thank you. Just that. Thank you." Torres started walking away, then paused. "That's why I do this job, Commander. Not for glory or recognition or to prove how tough humans are. I do it because someone has to, and I can. Simple as that. I caught up with her near the transport. That shot. With the hostage. You really thought you could make it?" Torres laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Honestly? 60-40 odds at best. Wind was tricky, angles were bad, and I was operating on about 3 hours of sleep. But sometimes you take the low percentage play because it's better than the alternative." "That's insane." "Yeah, probably. But here's the thing about humans. We're really good at insane. Had to be. Spent most of our history making desperate plays against bad odds, fighting predators bigger than us, surviving disasters that should have killed us, turning disadvantages into advantages. We're basically the galaxy's experts at being the underdog." She climbed into the transport, settling into a seat with a sigh. "You know what the scary part is? I'm not even that good. Just a regular soldier. Earth has billions of us, all trained, all ready, all willing to make those hard calls. We're not invincible. We're just really, really persistent. And we don't quit." The transport lifted off, leaving Thresh Point behind. Through the window, I could see the civilians coming out of hiding, council troops helping them, beginning the work of rebuilding. All because one human had refused to accept acceptable losses. Back at the council station, I filed my report, kept it factual, professional, and included all the relevant data. But I added a recommendation at the end, a strong one. Humanity should be granted full military partnership status, not as auxiliaries or advisors, but as equals. Because they brought something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten or maybe never learned, the willingness to take impossible odds and make them work anyway. My supervisor read the report and laughed. One soldier gets lucky twice, and you want to change centuries of policy? Velkara, you're smarter than this. I thought about Torres holding that child, about her making an impossible shot, because the alternative was unacceptable, about the way she'd looked at Commander Zell and told him protocols didn't matter more than lives. With respect, sir, it's not luck. It's training, mindset, and a cultural approach to problem-solving that the rest of us need to learn. Humans aren't lucky. They're prepared for everything, including scenarios we can't imagine. He dismissed me, filed my report under irrelevant observations. The council voted to keep humans as advisors only, limited deployment, and restricted roles. All very safe and controlled. 6 months later, the Vrex swarm invaded the Outer Rim. Millions of them, insectoid horrors that operated on pure instinct and consumed everything organic. They'd wiped out 3 civilizations before anyone even knew they existed. Standard weapons barely slowed them down. Conventional tactics failed. The Council's forces got routed in the first week. We were looking at extinction. Complete, total, galactic-scale extinction. Then, Earth mobilized. Full deployment. Every soldier, every ship, every weapon they'd been quietly developing while the Council treated them like interesting novelties. They hit the swarm with tactics that shouldn't have worked, weapons that operated on principles we didn't understand, and a level of controlled aggression that made Kravik look peaceful. Captain Torres was there, so were 10,000 others, just like her. They pushed the swarm back, held impossible positions, turned certain defeat into grinding stalemate into eventual victory. It took 2 years and cost millions of lives, human and otherwise. But we won. After, the Council offered humanity full partnership. Voting rights, military integration, the works. Earth's representative, an older human woman named Ambassador Kim, just smiled. "We appreciate the offer," she said. "Really. But we've been doing fine on our own. Tell you what, though, you ever need help, you know where to find us. We're persistent like that." They withdrew to their corner of space, still friendly, still willing to talk, but done playing by everyone else's rules. The Council panicked, worried about losing their only effective military force, tried to negotiate, make deals, offer incentives. Earth's response was polite but firm. "We'll help when asked. We'll fight when necessary. But we're done being your attack dogs." Last I heard, Captain Maya Torres retired. Went back to Earth, started teaching at some military academy, training the next generation of humans to do what she did. Make impossible choices, take unlikely odds, and somehow make it work. I requested another transfer, got approved this time, assigned to the Earth Embassy as a liaison officer. Figure, if I'm going to understand the species that saved the galaxy, might as well go to the source. My first day, Torres showed up at my office, brought coffee, which is apparently a human bonding ritual involving caffeine and mild social obligation. "Heard you were coming," she said, settling into a chair. "Figured I'd stop by, see how you're settling in." "I'm managing. Still trying to understand humans, though. You saved us all and then just left." Torres shrugged. "We did what needed doing. That's it. No big mystery. See a problem? Fix it? Move on. Standard human operating procedure." "But you could have demanded anything," Could have ruled the council, could have taken over. She looked genuinely confused. Why would we want to do that? Sounds like a lot of paperwork. We just want to live our lives, explore, learn, maybe help people when we can. Ruling? That's someone else's job. I sipped the coffee. Bitter, strange, but not unpleasant. Kind of like humans themselves. So what now? Torres smiled. The warm one, this time. Now? We keep going. Keep training. Keep preparing. Because the galaxy's a dangerous place, and someone needs to be ready when the next impossible situation shows up. Might as well be us. We're good at impossible. She stood, headed for the door, then looked back. Oh, and Velkara? Thanks. For what? For trying to warn them. For seeing what we were before everyone else. For giving us a chance. Her grin turned slightly mischievous. Even if it did take an extinction-level event for anyone to listen to you. After she left, I sat in my office and thought about everything I'd seen. The warlord who surrendered to a knife, the hostage saved by an impossible shot, the swarm driven back by sheer human stubbornness. We looked at their size, their strength, their technology, all the wrong metrics. What made humans dangerous wasn't any of that. It was simpler and somehow scarier. They just refused to accept that some problems couldn't be solved. Some odds couldn't be beaten. Some situations were truly hopeless. They looked at impossible and said, "Watch this." And then they did it anyway. Somewhere out there, Kravik was serving his sentence, probably still wondering how. A tiny human with a knife had beaten him. The answer was simple, really. She hadn't beaten him with the knife. She'd beaten him by being human. And that was more than enough.